What began as a routine late-night promotional interview turned into one of television's most shocking confrontations. Denzel Washington walked off Stephen Colbert's show after the host blindsided him with personal questions about his faith and politics, leaving the studio audience stunned and the internet in chaos. The Ed Sullivan Theater was buzzing with its usual excitement. Audience members filled the seats, expecting laughs, charm, and another entertaining celebrity appearance. Denzel had come to promote his latest film, a drama about redemption and second chances. Critics were praising the project, calling it one of the best films of his career, and the appearance on Colbert was meant to be a key stop in his promotional tour. But behind the scenes, the mood was very different. Sources later revealed that Colbert's writing team had spent hours preparing sharp questions meant to put Washington on the spot. Colbert himself reportedly told producers that he wanted to challenge Denzel, especially on his well-known Christian faith and the moral themes he often spoke about in interviews. When the show began, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Colbert came out to cheers, delivered his usual political jokes, and warmed up the crowd. The audience was laughing, clapping, and ready for what they assumed would be a relaxed night. Backstage, however, Denzel's publicist was growing uneasy. She had overheard some of the questions Colbert rehearsed, and she feared this wasn't going to be the easy interview her client had been promised. Then came the big introduction. Colbert called Denzel's name, and the audience erupted in applause. Washington walked out with his usual calm confidence, smiling warmly as he shook the host's hand. The opening moments felt normal, some light jokes about his work ethic, friendly banter, and a quick dive into the themes of his new movie. But Colbert quickly shifted gears. "So, Denzel," he began, his tone sharp beneath the smile, "this new film talks a lot about forgiveness and redemption. Given your strong Christian background, how much did your personal faith influence the way you approached this story?" It seemed like a fair question at first. Denzel nodded and answered with his usual thoughtfulness. "Faith gives us all a framework," he said. "For me, it's about understanding forgiveness, about finding your way back when life gets difficult. That's really what this character is about, making mistakes, but still trying to rediscover who he truly is." The audience nodded along. It was the kind of answer they expected from Washington, measured, wise, and respectful. But Colbert wasn't finished. "Right," the host pressed, leaning forward, "but here's the thing. You've been open about your Christianity, and I respect that. But don't you think it's a little ironic? Hollywood is built on fantasy, make-believe, and yet actors often use their platform to talk about moral values. Isn't that a contradiction?" A flicker of tension crossed Denzel's face. This wasn't what he had agreed to discuss. From the side of the stage, his publicist shifted uncomfortably. Still, Washington kept his cool. "I wouldn't call it lecturing," he replied carefully. "When you're given a platform, you have to be authentic about who you are. I don't tell anyone how to live. I simply share my truth, and people can take it or leave it." But Colbert pushed harder. "Let's be real here. You've stayed pretty quiet on controversial issues, things like marriage equality, women's rights, religion in politics. Isn't that just avoiding the heat while still using faith as a shield? Some people would say that's having it both ways." The room went silent. This was no longer late-night entertainment. It felt like a debate. Denzel's jaw tightened, but his voice was calm. "My faith teaches me to love people, not to judge them," he said firmly. "When I talk about values, I mean hard work, treating others with dignity, taking care of family. I'm not a politician, Stephen. I'm not asking anyone to live by my beliefs." Colbert, however, seemed energized by the conflict. He leaned forward again. "Come on, Denzel. You go to church regularly, right? Your pastor must have strong opinions about gay marriage or abortion. Surely you either agree or you don't. Isn't silence itself a position?" The cameras caught Washington's face change. The warmth was gone. His eyes narrowed. "Are you interviewing me about my film?" he asked slowly. "Or are you trying to drag me into a political debate so you can get a viral moment?" The crowd shifted nervously. Some laughed, but it was a strained laugh, the kind that comes when people aren't sure if what they're watching is real or staged. Colbert pressed on. "I'm just trying to have an honest conversation. You're one of the greatest actors of our time. You have influence. Don't you think you owe it to people to be clear about where you stand? Washington paused. For a moment, he just sat there, his posture rigid, his hands folded. Then he shook his head slowly. "I came here to talk about my film, not to be used as a soundbite. If this is what the conversation is going to be, then I think we're done." The studio fell into stunned silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Denzel calmly removed his microphone. Colbert tried to recover, calling out, "Wait, Denzel, don't go, we're just talking." But Washington stood, shook the host's hand with cool finality, and walked off stage. The audience didn't know how to react. Some clapped in support, others sat frozen. The producers scrambled as the cameras cut to commercial. Social media exploded within minutes. Clips of the moment spread across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, sparking fierce debates. Some praised Denzel for standing his ground. Others accused Colbert of pushing too far. By the next morning, the walkout was front-page news. What was meant to be a simple promotional interview had turned into a cultural flashpoint, raising questions about faith, politics, and the role of celebrities in public debate. And through it all, one thing was clear. The night Denzel Washington walked off Stephen Colbert's stage would be remembered as one of the most explosive moments in live television history. The questions grew sharper, the tension heavier. Colbert leaned in, refusing to let go. "But Denzel, when you talk about faith and values in your interviews, when you make movies about redemption and second chances, don't you think audiences deserve to know where you really stand on the issues that matter?" Washington's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the arms of his chair. "The issues that matter to who?" he shot back. "To you. To your audience. Or to the millions of people who just want to see a good movie and maybe leave the theater feeling like the world isn't completely broken. Which people are we talking about here?" Colbert's expression hardened. His voice rose slightly, carrying a self-righteous edge. "Look, we live in unprecedented times. Democracy is under attack. Women's rights are being rolled back. LGBTQ+ Americans are facing new forms of discrimination. When someone with your influence chooses silence while claiming the moral authority of faith, it raises questions." The room was suffocating with silence. The audience shifted uneasily. In the wings, Washington's publicist had moved to the edge of the stage, her phone in hand, ready to step in if things spiraled further. Up in the control booth, producers exchanged alarmed glances. "Moral authority," Washington repeated, his voice rising now for the first time. "I never claimed moral authority over anyone. I talk about my experiences. I share what's gotten me through the hard times. And I try to make films that mean something. That's it. But what you're doing right now, forcing me into political boxes so you can score points with your audience or get a viral clip, that's not about accountability. That's about exploitation." Colbert's polished TV persona was slipping, the warmth replaced by aggression. "I'm trying to hold you accountable," he snapped. "When you talk about values and faith but won't take a stand on the most important moral issues of our time, what message are you sending?" Washington leaned forward, his voice carrying an edge that made several audience members squirm in their seats. "The message it sends," he said, each word deliberate, "is that maybe, just maybe, a person's relationship with God, their understanding of right and wrong, doesn't have to fit into your neat little political categories. Maybe some of us believe that treating people with dignity and respect matters more than checking the right ideological boxes for late-night TV hosts." Scattered applause broke out in the theater, some clapping loudly in support, others hesitating, unsure whether to join in. A few audience members sat in stony silence, clearly uncomfortable. Colbert's face flushed red. "So you're saying that staying neutral on civil rights issues is somehow treating people with respect?" That was the breaking point. Washington pushed himself up from his chair. His tall frame towered over the stage, his calm composure finally cracking. "I'm saying," he thundered, "that ambushing a guest who came here in good faith to talk about their work, then trying to corner them into political soundbites so you can look righteous, is not treating people with respect." The audience gasped. This was no longer an interview. It was a confrontation, raw and unfiltered, and everyone felt it spiraling out of control. Colbert, realizing he had pushed too far but unwilling to back down, doubled down instead. "Sit down, Denzel," he said sharply. "We're having a conversation. This is exactly the kind of deflection I'm talking about. When pressed on real issues, You make it about me instead of addressing the substance." But Washington didn't sit. He remained standing, his presence commanding the stage in a way that made Colbert look small behind his desk. His voice rang out, clear and unshakable. "The substance is this. You invited me here under false pretenses. My team was told we'd be talking about the film. Instead, you're trying to turn me into your political punching bag. That's not journalism. That's ambush theater." Colbert's tone grew cutting, condescending. "Oh, come on. You're a public figure worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You can handle a few tough questions, unless what you're really saying is that your faith only works when everyone's being nice to you." The jab landed hard. The audience gasped again. Washington's eyes flashed, his voice now sharp as a blade. "You want to talk about my faith," he said. "My faith taught me to turn the other cheek, Stephen. But it also taught me not to cast pearls before swine." The line hit like a thunderclap. The audience froze. Some gasped. Others clapped nervously. Colbert's face drained from red to pale white, his mouth opening in shock. "Did you just call me swine on my own show?" His voice trembled slightly, the control he prided himself on slipping through his fingers. Washington didn't flinch. His voice was steady, deliberate, devastating. "I called it the way I see it. You sit behind this desk, safe, tearing down people's character for entertainment. Tell me, what would you call that?" The control room was in chaos. The executive producer waved frantically, signaling to cut to commercial. But Colbert, his ego wounded, waved them off. He was too deep in to back down now. "I'd call it journalism," Colbert shot back bitterly. "I'd call it holding powerful people accountable. You walk around Hollywood making movies about redemption and morality, but when it comes to issues that really matter to people's lives, you stay silent. That's not faith. That's cowardice disguised as wisdom." The word cowardice hung in the air like poison. The crowd let out a collective gasp. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others leaned forward, desperate to see what Washington would do next. Slowly, deliberately, Denzel stepped closer to the desk. His tall frame loomed over Colbert, the tension so thick you could feel it in your chest. His voice dropped lower, but every word carried like a hammer. The air in the Ed Sullivan Theater was heavy. What had begun as a promotional interview was now a confrontation spiraling far beyond late-night entertainment. Washington leaned forward, his voice low but cutting. "Cowardice, Stephen? Let me tell you about cowardice. Cowardice is hiding behind comedy when you want to attack someone. Cowardice is using your platform to ambush guests who can't fight back on equal terms. Cowardice is exactly what you're doing right now." The words landed like punches. The audience shifted in their seats, many visibly uncomfortable. A few people even stood as if unsure whether to leave. The light-hearted rhythm of television was gone. What remained was raw tension. Colbert stood up from behind his desk, trying to match Washington's presence. His voice was tight. "I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm asking direct questions about your beliefs, your responsibility as a public figure. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." Washington's reply was almost whispered, but it carried across the room with dangerous weight. "Maybe I shouldn't," he said. "Maybe I should stick to working with professionals who understand the difference between an interview and an interrogation." Colbert's control was slipping. His voice cracked as it rose. "Professional? You think ducking every important question while pretending to have the moral high ground is professional? You think using your faith as a shield while refusing to take a real stand is professional?" Washington's answer was like ice. "I think treating a guest with basic human decency is professional. I think honoring the agreement your staff made about what this interview would cover is professional. What you're doing, Stephen, isn't journalism. It's a hit job, with better lighting." The audience gasped. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Colbert's mask of humor and control shattered completely. His voice carried a bitter edge. "A hit job? You came on my show. Nobody forced you. If you can't handle real questions about real issues, then maybe you should stick to puff pieces on entertainment tonight." Washington stepped back, not in retreat, but in disgust. His voice was steady. "Real questions? Is that what you call this? You've spent 15 minutes trying to corner me into political statements that have nothing to do with why I'm here. You've questioned my faith, my integrity, and my character. All under the pretense of journalism." Colbert was unraveling, his tone laced with anger and humiliation. "I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm trying to get honest answers from someone who's made a career out of playing both sides. You want the respect that comes with being a moral voice, but you don't want the heat that comes with having real positions." The theater was silent except for the whirring cameras and the heavy breaths of two men locked in combat. Washington looked out at the audience. Some were staring in shock, others with sympathy. His expression softened just slightly, as if pitying the host in front of him. Then he turned back to Colbert. "You know what, Stephen? You're right about one thing. I do want respect. But here's the difference. I try to earn it, through my work, through how I treat people, through the example I set. You, on the other hand, seem to think you can demand it while tearing others down." Colbert's voice shook with anger. His professionalism was gone. "Don't you dare lecture me about respect. You've been condescending to me since you walked out here, acting like you're above it all, like you're too good for real questions." Washington shook his head slowly. "The only thing I'm too good for is this ambush, this performance, this attempt to use me for your political theater. I came here to talk about a film that means something to me. Instead, you've turned it into whatever this is." The host, no longer thinking clearly, fired back with desperation. "This is accountability. This is what happens when you try to have it both ways. You can't claim to be a moral leader while staying silent on the issues that matter." Washington's voice carried exhaustion now, but also conviction. "Moral leader? I never claimed to be anybody's leader. I'm an actor, a director, a man with faith. That's it. But you've decided that isn't enough. You've decided I have to be your perfect political puppet, or your villain. Well, Stephen, I'm neither." The confrontation had reached its boiling point. The studio was frozen in silence, every eye fixed on the two men. Colbert, realizing he was losing control of his own show, made one final, desperate attempt to win the moment. "Fine. Walk away. Prove my point. Show everyone what happens when someone with real questions corners you. Run back to your safe spaces and softball interviews." Washington paused, his hand resting on the back of his chair. For a second, it looked as if he might unleash one final blast of anger. Instead, he straightened his jacket, lifted his chin, and turned toward the cameras. "You know what, Stephen? You're absolutely right. I am going to walk away. Not because I can't handle tough questions, but because I respect myself too much to participate in this circus any longer." The calmness of his voice was devastating. Colbert had been shouting, but Washington's restraint carried more power than anger ever could. The camera operator, unsure of what to do, kept rolling as Washington addressed the viewers at home. "To anyone watching tonight who expected to hear about a film that explores forgiveness and redemption, I apologize. Instead, you had to witness this. The movie opens this Friday. I hope you'll judge it on its own merits." Colbert tried to cut him off, scrambling to regain control. "Oh, so now you're going to use my show to promote your movie, after calling me swine?" Washington turned back to him, his eyes cold, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm going to do what professionals do, Stephen. I'm going to honor my commitment to the people who worked on this film, even if you couldn't honor your commitment to conduct a respectful interview." Colbert's face flushed. His hands trembled as he shuffled his cards. His voice cracked with frustration. He had lost, not just control of the interview, but the respect of his audience. And with that, Denzel Washington unclipped his microphone, set it neatly on the desk, and walked off stage. The audience erupted, some cheering, some booing, some simply stunned into silence. But one thing was undeniable. Late-night television had just witnessed one of its most explosive moments. The studio was tense. Colbert leaned forward, voice sharp. "You've been acting self-righteous since you sat down, Denzel. Too pure for politics while the rest of us live in the real world." Washington's composure cracked, his voice rising with conviction. "The real world? I grew up poor in Mount Vernon. That's where I learned a man's word is his bond. That's where people treat each other with dignity even when they disagree. This," he swept his arm at the studio lights, "is not the real world. This is a stage where ambushing a guest passes for courage." The audience was silent, caught between discomfort and fascination. Colbert, losing control, snapped, "Fine, leave. But don't expect to come crawling back for publicity. Don't pretend you're some kind of hero." Washington stopped, turned slowly, his eyes steady. "Hero? I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just trying to be a man, something you might want to try sometime." The words hit like a blow. Colbert's face hardened. "Get out. Security." But Washington was already walking off, dignity intact. Before exiting, he turned back to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't come here for this. I came to share a film about forgiveness and redemption. Instead, you saw what happens when respect is forgotten. I hope you'll still judge the work on its own merits." Colbert stood frozen behind his desk as the cameras cut to commercial, his authority shattered. By the next morning, clips of the confrontation had spread everywhere. Hashtags trended, think pieces called his professionalism into question, and ratings began to slide. Meanwhile, Washington simply said to reporters, "I wish Mr. Colbert well. I'm focused on my work and on the people who support it." His film opened strong, praised by critics and audiences alike. One man walked away with his integrity intact. The other was left exposed, undone by his own arrogance. Moments like this remind us why respect, honesty, and dignity matter more than spectacle. Don't just watch, take action. Support art that uplifts, leaders who listen, and voices that build bridges instead of walls. Choose integrity over outrage. Choose respect.